How's it going, financial coaches? Peter here. Hey, I want to talk to you today about what you need in terms of training and knowledge and certifications to get started with financial coaching. I've talked about this before a little bit in the certifications video that I did, but I get this question a lot, it's particularly one-on-one, and there's nothing wrong with it, but how should I go about getting ready to do coaching? And this, I think, varies by everyone individually because everyone has different coaching backgrounds and counseling and consulting backgrounds. Everyone has different levels of knowledge of financial services and financial products and personal finance. So I think it really varies. And what I thought I would do here is we all love a good matrix. So I thought I would put together a matrix that hopefully is helpful for you to figure out what you should do. And I really believe in this. I mean, it's maybe a little oversimplified, and depending on where you come from, I would probably say, like in a one-on-one, that maybe we should sprinkle in a little bit of this, or maybe your experiences in mortgages. So I would love to have a little bit more banking or investment-related knowledge. So there's all sorts of things that we could tweak about this, but I think in general, if you do these things, it's not going to be overly duplicative or redundant. It's going to be just the stuff you need to get started, because I think the reality is most people will continue to learn, and they will realize there is more to learn, and they get stuck in this vicious loop of continuing to learn and never actually getting started. And what I think people need to do is really focus on, what do I need to get going as quickly as possible? And so I want to break it down for you like this. I've got this matrix up here. Kind of orange is kind of the biggest worry, the biggest area of concern, the most work. Yellow is kind of that middle area. I think you've got some of the components. We're going to add on to that. And then green is probably, the most ready. So as we look at this matrix here, what I want to show you is that if I go ahead and put on the axes, and hopefully this little bar here won't cover up everything all the time, but if I look at these, we have financial knowledge on the bottom. Like, how is your financial knowledge? And then if we look on the other side, on the other axis, we're going to talk about your coaching knowledge. Now, I'm going to expand coaching to more than just pure coaching, but some of you may have come from a health coaching background or a life coaching background, and so some of these techniques and the knowledge that goes into being able to do those roles is going to be about the same. So you really need two components. You need financial knowledge and you need coaching knowledge or counseling knowledge. And then if you have that, what I'm going to just break it up into is just kind of the simple big buckets. Do you have low financial knowledge or high financial knowledge? Do you come from the financial services industry? Is this something you've been doing yourself for a long period of time? And then again, coaching knowledge. Do you have a lot of coaching knowledge coming into this role, or do you have a very small amount of coaching knowledge or no coaching knowledge? When I started, I had really no coaching knowledge to speak of. So if you have low financial knowledge and low coaching knowledge, I think you can still get going, but what we're probably going to have to do is build that base. So the first thing I want you to do is actually pick up a book by well coaches, and I'm going to show it to you here. It is called The Coaching Psychology Manual. And again, I am going to try to just show you some of these things that I think are going to give you what you need, right? You could read a ton of coaching books and go through a ton of coaching classes, and there's, limitless supplies of those, but I don't know that you really need to obsess about it. And like I said, financial coaching is often a little bit of financial therapy, some financial coaching, often a lot of financial counseling, or even sometimes what we kind of think of as advice, but not financial advising, if that makes sense. And so the Coaching Psychology Manual is it's a thick spiral-bound book that they produce, and they actually do provide a coaching certification program that this book relies on. So you go through that, and then you go through the certification. I'm not saying do that certification. What I'm saying is that you can buy this book. It looks like it's about $58, $60, $59. You can buy this. It's a good primer on just kind of the ideas of coaching, why we think they work, what the psychology is, how do we help people do some goal identification, figure out what the roadblocks are, the language to use, those kind of techniques and processes and tips and tricks. And so it's going to help you a little bit just kind of understand the mindset of the coach. And this is going to be pretty broad based. It's going to be very, very general coaching. There's nothing in this book that's going to be financial coaching related. It's just going to be coaching. And one of the reasons that I bring this up and why I say you should read this and not go into a bunch of other stuff, if you read other coaching books, that's great. And you probably don't need to go any further than that. But If you haven't had any exposure to coaching, if you've maybe done a little counseling or consulting and stuff like this, a lot of it might seem pretty familiar, but it's really kind of strategies on how to get people to buy into the things that they identify. How do we help them identify their own goals and figure out steps to get there and be accountable to themselves and those types of things. So it's very, very coaching focused, okay? And it's not going to take you long to get through this book. It's not that long, and there's nothing about it that's a really heavy lift in my opinion, okay? So that Well Coaches book, I think, should be a prerequisite read. And the reason I start with that is I think that the coaching stuff is on this axis and in this box is going to be the easier lift, and you probably don't need to spend as much time on it as you will on financial information. And some people would disagree with me on that, but I am actually a pretty big believer that most people get a knack of the coaching stuff pretty quickly. And if you went to a day coaching training, I think a lot of the stuff is going to feel very normal, very right. It's probably stuff that you do, and you don't even realize that these are kind of coaching techniques. If you have a good rapport with people, if you set, the table with people and kind of dive into conversation and connect with people, and you find it easy to, connect at that level and have conversations and hold conversations, and people like you and find you charismatic and inspiring, and they want to follow your advice and all those things. I think all those are good signs that you probably have the elements, you probably have the techniques, and that you're using them without even maybe recognizing it. So I think a lot of this is going to be very kind of eye-opening, but also duplicative of some of the skills sets that you already have. What I think is going to be much harder is to build the repertoire of financial information, which is going to be as good as many of the people that you work with and better, because you are going to have to be the expert in their eyes. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be the expert of experts in the financial world. I have been doing financial services for over 20 years, and there are always things to learn. And even with financial professionals, we share ideas, and there's always stuff that I haven't heard of. And that's because the financial services and personal finance world encompasses so much, whether it's getting your first mortgage or credit scores or investments or whatever it might be, right? There's just no way for everyone to be an expert on all of it. And so because there's so much, what you're probably going to need is a broad base of knowledge, and then you will probably find your lane. You'll find your niche. You'll find what's interesting to you and where you kind of really excel, and that's going to be important. But you are probably going to need to be fed with a fire hose on financial information, and that's just kind of the nature of it, unfortunately. And so there's just going to be more volume of financial education work. All right. So to get there, I think, in my opinion, what you need is the AFC designation, the Accredited Financial Counselor designation. And the reason I bring that up, and I'm going to show it to you here, I'm going to pull this up. The AFCPE is a great organization. They're probably one of the premier organizations in terms of kind of the personal finance professional space. And I will say outside of financial advising, if you're going to get into financial advising or really go after some other certifications like the personal financial consultant and CFP, the certified financial planner, and some of those things, other great organizations, great certifications, but this one is really more aligned, I think, with what the role of a financial coach is. Now, it's called financial counselor, and I think that's perfect because in this case, you are going to be doing a lot of counseling. I just think coaching blends into that very naturally, and 9 times out of 10, most of those sessions are going to be coaching and counseling combined. So what this does, and I've talked a little bit about this before, is that it is pretty heavy on financial knowledge. In no way do you come out of this with the information here and I would bless you as an expert in personal finance, but I would say you are competent. If I see people with the AFC designation, I know that they've gone through a certain amount of material, and again, some of it's pretty cursory. There is some deep dives into some things about what percentage of your income should you be spending on rent or mortgages and those types of things. So it's not just high level conceptual. And so I know that this is a good place to get a certification that's going to give you some of the counseling tricks, some of the coaching tricks, but also give you a good run through of the landscape of financial information. Now, this is expensive. I won't sugarcoat this in any way. $1,300 to $2,000 depending on how you do it. And the self-paced study one is probably the right way to go. You have 3 years from the time of registration, but it's an investment. And this is one of those things where I'd say, do you really want to do this? And I know people look for cheaper things, and I'm going to talk about some of the cheaper certifications, but this is probably one of those things, if you are light on coaching experience and you are light on financial knowledge, then you probably are going to get your money's worth out of this, and it's probably going to be a pretty challenging. When I took this test, and granted, I had a lot of financial background going into it, and I did very well in the test, but when I went to do this, I did it on site, and I took the on-site review class, which was very helpful. It actually met for 2 days. But the second half of the second day was the test. So you kind of meet all day for one day, and then you met in the morning session to do some review, and then in the afternoon you take the test. Fortunately I passed on it on the first try, but I know that some of the people that were in that review class were taking this for the third time. So it is something that is very possible that you don't pass, and I probably wouldn't sweat it. I know people get really nervous about tests. You do get your results the same day, and I can't remember if it was moments after, but it's pretty quickly after. And so the good thing about it is you'll know where you passed or failed. They do break the results out in sections. They don't give you the questions, but you'll know if you're light on rent and mortgage, or if you're light on financial concepts and some of those types of things. So it's really good in that way. But in terms of getting a good fed by the fire hose financial information course, there are others out there, but ultimately if you pass this, you end up walking away with the AFC certification, which I think is actually one of the premier certifications for us in this business. So that's available, and I think that they have some other ones. The self-study, I guess, is the cheapest, but I thought they had some ways to say, hey, if you don't get like study cards or something, don't quote me on this, but there are some ways to kind of shave off some money. That's why it's $1,300 to $2,000. So if you don't get some of the books or whatever, it's a little bit different. So maybe it's the way they break it down here. I can't remember. Maybe there's just things that you add on. I think the on-site exam review was more expensive than doing it virtually or digitally. So kind of keep that in mind. But I think for the most part, if you're low on both coaching and financial knowledge, read the Well Coaches book and then dive into the CPFC certification. And don't reread the Well Coaches book because there's some duplicative stuff in the certification. All right, so now let's go on to if you are low on financial knowledge, but you are high on coaching knowledge. So this is, I think, applicable to people who have done coaching, professionally or, as a side hustle or something like that, in terms of like health coaching, life coaching, business coaching. You are familiar with the term self-efficacious behavior. You have heard a lot about active listening and goal setting and milestones and the importance of buy-in and accountability and all the things that we think about at coaching, and meeting you where you're at, and all these things, which I generally can't stand the terminology because they just get drilled into you, and I think they kind of get over drilled in some places. But you probably have this experience, and you're familiar with the techniques and the processes and that stuff. Well, you probably don't need a ton of coaching experience, but you are light on financial knowledge, and so you think, hey, I'm going to be able to do this because I have coaching experience, and coaching is coaching. And I will say that is correct for most coaching disciplines, but not for financial coaching. So for financial coaching, you have got to have financial knowledge, financial product knowledge, financial strategy knowledge, tax knowledge, personal finance knowledge, investment knowledge. All of these things are going to be pieces to the broader puzzle for you so that you can really give people good guidance. It doesn't mean you're going to be recommending mortgages or diving deep into how, reverse mortgages work and how the interest rates work and ARMs and all these other things. That's not what I'm saying, but you've got to understand how all these plug together, right? If I do this and move block A, how does it move block C, and those types of things. So here is where I would also say, go and sign up for the AFCPEAFC, right? Go and just take it, because it's going to be feeding by the fire hose. I wouldn't recommend reading the Well Coaches book, maybe if you need a refresher, but it's really just about kind of how can we immerse yourself in financial knowledge without casting you out to the ocean of financial information. Because if you just go out there and try to read stuff, you can read blog after blog post, you can get 10 different opinions on the same issue and the exact same case study, and you are going to continue to swim in circles forever. And the AFC is just going to kind of give you a very linear approach through financial knowledge. So just go out and get that one. Again, $1,300 to $2,000. I think to be really honest, it's a good certification and comprehensive, but I think it is the baseline for what you need. I really do. So, all right, let's talk about the next one. Now you have high financial knowledge and low coaching experience. I think you can start seeing where this is going. So this is the example of this is that, let's say you come from financial advising, you have a lot of personal finance experience. That's where I came from. So I kind of thought I saw it all, but I didn't, because we're kind of working with a subset of the population, a target demographic. But that gave me a lot of background. And then before that, I was in banking and investment management. And so I got a lot of information there. So I had a lot. And if you're coming from a background like this, maybe you were working as a mortgage broker, but you talked with people about their finances because they needed to know like how to get their credit score in the right place and how much they had to have down payment. I've met a lot of mortgage brokers who are actually very, very savvy in terms of personal finance. So that's maybe one example. Or maybe you did financial instruction. You were a financial teacher for financial aid and college funding and stuff like this. And those types of things tend to have tentacles and other things because everything is so interconnected. So maybe you came from a discipline where financial knowledge was great. Maybe you even have your CFP, your certified financial planner. So really kind of understanding the estate taxes and tax strategies and legacy planning and all this stuff. I mean, you've got a lot of this down cold, all right? But you haven't necessarily done financial coaching. Well, you can see how these matrices work out, right? I would go ahead and pick up that Well Coaches book, the Coaching Psychology Manual, spend $60, read through that. Maybe read through it a couple times if you really need to, but I think when you read through it, you're going to say, hey, I'm working with people. I've been working with people for a long time, and I use some of these myself, and I've got good rapport, and these are other great strategies and processes and techniques that I can use, and I kind of get it, right? And you're going to get people of maybe different stripes when you're working in financial coaching than when you are working with a very specific role in financial services, right? If people are looking for a mortgage broker, they tend to be financially good shape, right? Maybe a down payment, maybe a good credit score. They kind of work their way there. And so it tends to be a little bit narrow. And now you might take on people with a lot of debt or maybe people with a big net worth. It can just be much, much different. And so the Coaching Psychology Manual here is going to be kind of a good introduction just in the psychology of coaching and again, how to build those relationships and kind of get people to move along in that process as you're kind of moving up the financial ladder. So that's what I would do in this case. And because you actually have that financial knowledge, we're not going to do any really financial training. But the other thing that I mentioned here is counseling, right? The financial counseling aspect of this. So not only are we going to try to help people be self-efficacious in a coaching way, which tends to be hands-off, kind of trying to empower them to do everything, but there are going to be times when you're going to help take the reins and really give people a path, a to-do list, homework, those types of things to really kind of move forward in life, especially if they have a lot of debt or especially if they're trying to learn how to budget or maybe they're trying to figure out what to do about, family planning and they got to get their wills and trusts and life insurance beneficiaries and 401k and retirement beneficiaries up to date. And they've got to, take an inventory of who owes what and everything, right? So there are a lot of times when you're going to inject that financial information, that financial guidance, instructions, maybe even kind of demands, right? Nudges, pushes, those types of things. And that's going to be really a big piece of financial counseling. So there's this book. And I'm a little surprised that it's a little hard to get here. It's called Financial Counseling, A Strategic Approach. And, it's a small book, but it's a little bit thicker. And I think it's going to be a pretty easy read. It's going to make a lot of sense. Obviously, it's $37, which I think is a good investment. It looks like for used copies, you're at $15 or $16. So that's going to be very cheap. But one of the things that you're going to read here is just kind of how to talk with people that are sometimes struggling and how to reassure them that you're on their side and, how to just create warm environments and how to establish some trust at the beginning. And these are things that are going to be important because if they come in and they're standoffish or you're talking down to them, if they don't feel like there is something that inspires them to work for you, to kind of like earn your praise, right? They're probably not going to come back. The things that you say, hey, listen, I know this is going to be tough, but what I want you to do is I want you to go download your last 3 credit card statements and bring them to our meeting, and I want to go through those with you next time, right? They're probably not even going to show up, and this is the key, right? We can't make progress with people if they're not going to do the things, or if they even show up and they're like, I didn't do it. These are books that are going to give you some strategies to make sure that everyone is on the same page, that they want to do what they can to help themselves, that they want to please you, and that they are going to be primed to take instruction from you when that need arises and go and do it, right? And so this financial counseling book is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a good pair to the coaching book, which is a little bit more about us as coaches being hands-off with people, making them do all the work. But there are going to be times when you're going to be doing the work, like I said, dropping in as an educator, dropping into that conversation with suggestions, dropping in with assignments. And the counseling book is going to explore those concepts in more detail. So it's going to be a heavier read. It's probably going to take you a little time to get through it, but I think the concepts are going to make sense. And again, they give you a lot of acronyms and tools to use. I don't think you have to memorize those, but as you're reading it, I think it's going to all make sense. And if you really internalize it and then go into those meetings thinking about how you're going to do things, it's going to be really valuable in that case. So what we're going to do here is we're going to read that Well Coaches book and the financial counseling book, and then that's not the end of it. We are going to get certified in the FinCert CPFC is what I believe it's called. And here it is. It is the Certified Personal Finance Counselor. This is available at fincert.org. I'll put links to all this in the description. And FinCert is an organization that does financial certifications of sort. This is going to be a much lighter certifications than the AFC. It's going to be much easier. And the reason I bring this up is twofold. One, it's also going to prime you with a bunch of general financial knowledge, and it's going to be, personal finance focused, but it's not going to be hard. And I'll be honest, if you take this, you actually, when you sign up for it, you have to wait 30 days before you can even take the test. So they require a certain amount of time to make sure that you study. You're probably going to get a book. It's probably going to actually be electronic now. I think it's online. It's a PDF or something like that. And you're going to just go through it, and a lot of this is going to look familiar. And for those of you who have, say, the CFP, or you've been in the business a long time, or you've come from banking or lending or something like this, the reality is you can probably skim the book, and after your 30 days are up, you can take the online test and you'll probably pass. I think it's going to be very light lifting for you. And the reason I bring this up is not so much that it's going to bring new knowledge to you, because you've already come from this space. You don't probably need to be fed with a fire hose on financial information. But there are probably going to be things that you didn't know, whether it's government programs and stuff. So there are going to be some general things in there that are going to be helpful, and you didn't know that, and you take some notes. And it's also going to be pretty wide. So you can also help figure out maybe some of the areas maybe you're a little weaker on. And again, you don't have to figure this out right now because it might not apply to your coaching sessions. But as you're kind of going through and you're saying, I didn't really look at what the government assistance programs are. I didn't really understand the food stamps and the nutritional supplement programs. So, and I'm getting that question a lot, or, the WIC program for mothers. It just depends on where you're working. And so now that I know that some of those exist, but I'm not that familiar, I can go ahead and kind of dive a little deeper. So for those with financial background, I think this is good because it's probably going to be pretty easy, but it's also going to help you identify some of the areas where you're maybe a little light. But on top of that, it's also going to give you a certification. You will be a CPFC at the end, which also helps put clients and prospects a little bit at ease. I'll be honest, I have a lot of certifications, and clients have not really cared about it. I've gotten a few times like, why should I use you? What makes you an expert on finances? Or, can you tell me a little bit about your financial background, right? I mean, I get that sometimes, but in general, most people don't care. And that's usually because I've done a pretty good job of sharing my financial knowledge before, so that when they're coming to me, it's not just a cold connection. It's not just a cold referral where they don't know me. A lot of those barriers and walls have been broken down prior to that first session. But the other advantage to this is it's much more affordable. It is $399. And again, I think you have to wait 30 days to take the test. I think you can wait up to a year before you take the test. Again, it's going to be probably pretty easy for you, but for $400, you're going to have something that says, hey, I know generally what I'm doing in counseling with financial knowledge, and it's just going to be a little alphabet soup that you can throw after your name, but sometimes people want that. And I just think it's another good way just to prove to yourself that you're keeping things sharp, if that makes sense, right? So let's go back here. Now, let's say you got high coaching knowledge, and you've got high financial knowledge. Maybe you even were a financial coach at a previous job. Maybe you worked for an agency, right? Maybe you just are of the age where you have seen it and done it all, right? I mean, I've interviewed some people for financial coaching positions where they just, they kind of figured it out on their own. They had to figure out how to budget. They had to figure out how to raise kids. They had to figure out retirement on their own. They made those things happen. And, they're an expert just by living it. That is definitely legitimate. And coaching knowledge. Some of these people, have taken coaching. Some of these people, a lot of corporate jobs have required coaching courses. There's a lot of professional development where they send you to a professional development center to coach, right? Maybe it's to your employees and those types of things and using those techniques. So it's possible. Maybe you worked with a life coach or something like that. Or I've seen a lot of people moving from health coaching over to financial coaching. So, there's any number of reasons that you might have a lot of coaching knowledge and a lot of personal financial knowledge or personal finance knowledge. Now, I will say this. This is a moment for you to be self-aware about what your skills are. And if you're worried about it, that's not proof that you aren't adequate there. But what I would probably say is I would probably reach out to some people that know you pretty decently and ask them. If you aren't sure if you have a lot of personal finance knowledge, you should ask someone who knows you and say, would you think of me as someone who's a personal finance expert? If they're like, oh, I've never thought of you as an expert. I see that you're interested in it, but I mean, I'm interested in it too. I just don't talk about it as much as you do, but I read Barron's and blah, blah, and you might be surprised how much other people know. Or on the coaching knowledge, you might have taken a Udemy course on coaching, which, are fine, but, for 2 or 3 hours, how much information will you get on those? And you might think you know it all, and you might want to ask people, as a coach, as someone who mentors or talks or consults or tries to inspire people, what do you think of my skills in that realm? And people might say, I never really thought of you as kind of overly charismatic and, maybe a leader of people. These are all good signs that, you might have what it takes to do these coaching types of roles. And so, if people are worried about it, then, kind of skew yourself to some of these other areas. There's no problem in doing more. But if you think you're good and you're not that good, it's going to be really hard to improve. So one of the things that I just ask is, take a step back, think outside yourself. Have I gotten feedback that I'm really good in this? Does it show up in my job reviews? Am I asked about these things? Or do people ask me a lot for advice? Whatever it might be. And again, asking people who are willing to be honest with you. If you're asking people who maybe always tell you that the sun always shines wherever you're walking, well, then maybe those aren't the right people to ask. But sometimes I say, hey, listen, I'm not looking for accolades. I'd really love your honest opinion. In fact, I'm not even actually looking for you to point out the roses, just the thorns, right? Let's just start there, and I'm going to be really open, and it might hurt a little bit, but it's a good exercise. So let's say though you've passed all those litmus tests, you're good at coaching, you're good at personal finance knowledge. Here's my recommendation: get the FinCert CPFC. Because again, I think you're not going to have a problem passing it. It's going to be affordable. It's going to give you the alphabet soup. It's going to give you that designation, which is going to help put some people at ease. And, just do it. It's probably going to be something that you pass, maybe even without having to study, although I'd study. Right? And then get a client. Get out there and start working, right? Talk to people. Hey, would you be my first paying client? Or hey, this is what I'm doing, financial coaching. Is that something you'd be interested in? I tell you what, if it is something that would be interested in, how much would you pay? How much would you pay to work with me for an hour? Because the rubber meets the road when people are willing to put the money down. And when people are willing to put the money down, they are seeing value. Now, you have to distinguish whether people are being charitable to you because you're asking at that moment, but people will pay initially and again if they get the value out of it. So I think this is a really good idea or good opportunity, I should say, to determine what your price point is, the perceived value, how fast you move, what your niche is, who you can really add the most value to, and those types of things. But this is a point where I see some people who are very good at personal finance. They've come from an insurance company or something like that, so they've seen a lot of different things. They also have a lot of counseling and coaching skills already plugged in, and it's also possible that these people don't see themselves as high either. They might see themselves as low either, right? And that's really good, because I think those people are also constantly focused on personal improvement, and they also have a learner's mentality. There's a big difference between having a learner's mentality and saying I have a learner's mentality, right? A lot of people think that's the right answer. It's kind of like one of those behavioral interview questions. What's your strength? I'm always learning. Well, let's not say it and let's show it. And so if you have that, right, there's no problem in having more. But I think the reality is, if you find yourself in this quadrant of the matrix, you need to just start getting on it, right? And at this point, because you have the coaching and the financial, I would not give away free sessions, right? Because you have the value. There's really no good reason why you shouldn't be able to add value to coaching sessions. And the temptation here is, well, I want to take on a few beta clients just to kind of hone my own skills and get some testimonials and maybe be referable and those types of things. I wouldn't do that. What you need to do is you need to get a client, you need to get paying clients, and you really need to start figuring out where the gravity pulls you in terms of getting the right price, right? Appropriately price your product, appropriately price your service, how long it's going to take you, how much effort is it? Is there prep work? Is there post work? What kind of advice are you going to have to give? What kind of new certifications do you want to think about? Where do you have to kind of touch up your skills and your knowledge? All these things. And the practicing of financial coaching is going to be the method that you're going to be able to figure all this out. So get a client. There's, the probably of all these things, working with clients is going to provide the most value to them and to you as someone who's trying to develop themselves as a financial coach. So hopefully this little matrix helps. I like matrix. I'm a very visual person. But usually when I talk to people, what I try to figure out is where do they stand on coaching experience and knowledge and financial experience and knowledge, because it's really those types of things that allow someone to kind of figure out the path. Because everyone asks me, what should I do? What should I do? And I don't really know, because I don't really know what the gaps are. And I don't think training should be the same for every person, because everyone's a little bit different. But hopefully this gives you an idea of what you need to do. So if you have questions, let me know. I'm happy to help. Thanks so much for joining me here. And I hope that this helps you get out there, get appropriately trained, get comfortable with your skill sets, and start coaching. See you later.